Hello, it's Nikki with Just Beyond the Cottonwoods. Today's project is a West Virginia wildflower ball cap. I have a white ball cap, an embroidery needle. I'm also using a cutout of West Virginia to trace the shape that I need, an embroidery marker, some fabric scissors, and a variety of floss. I'm using 4 different colors today. These are DMC threads. These are my favorite to use. So I picked out some favorite colors, and now I'm just going to trace with my embroidery marker around West Virginia. This is a blue marker, but don't worry, it erases with water. Typically when I'm threading, I use 3 of the 6 strands of DMC floss, so I divide them in half, and I'll put these through my needle and just use a traditional knot that I roll around to my finger and pull. It's an easy favorite knot. I'm not worried about hiding my stitching in the back of this hat. And then I just stitch around the border about 1/4 of an inch or maybe a little bit smaller all the way around. If I need to rethread, I just tuck my tail in and start over. And when I'm finished with the border, I like to tuck it under where no one will be able to see it right behind the little flap there. I'm going to start with a rose in the center of this state, and to do that I'm just making a 5 points, kind of like a star, or 5 little arms coming out of the center here. This is the guide and the structure for my flower that I'm going to create. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to tuck in the thread on top of the hat by going up and under over and over again. And because there's an odd number of arms to this little star, it'll alternate between up and over and create a really nice raised dimensional shape of it. I think it looks most like a rose probably. You just want to take your time here and don't hit the fibers of the hat or the fibers of the next arm, just up and over. I find this very calming and peaceful part of this rose process, and I really enjoy it. And then once you've covered every arm with thread, you just tuck under the back. So you can see here, I'm just doing one more little thread through and then into the back, and then I'm just hiding my tail under the thread that's back there and clipping it off. Next, I'm going to do the stem, but I want to put a couple little leaves or greens underneath of the rose. This covers up any extra arm pieces that are kind of still left here, and this is just a daisy stitch. So I'm pulling up, putting back down, and I'm catching my loop before I pull it down and then securing with a little stitch inside there. And then I'll just stitch down to the base of West Virginia here to create the stem, and I'll add leaves here shortly. This stitch is probably about 1/4 inch long. Sometimes I'll do a long stitch. Other times for stems I like to do little short stitches. And when I'm about halfway through, I like to go ahead and add some leaves here. So I'm just going to add a little branch that comes off, and then a couple little daisy stitches for my leaves. You can tell I didn't pre-draw any of this. It's all just a matter of using my eye and putting things where I like them. Feel free to use the blue marker to place whatever flowers you like, if you find that helpful. I've done a lot of these, so I kind of like to place them where I think they look pretty, and that served me well. But if you're just starting out, feel free to go ahead and draw in some little flowers here, or we sell stick and stitch packs with designs on them already, so that's always a good option too. But the center of my state, this is the second state I've done a lot of Ohio, but we have a market in West Virginia where I plan to sell these, so doing a small batch of those. But I like to start with the center floral and then work my way out to the sides. For this next flower, it's a cluster of just kind of like little buds. So I'm doing simple French knots for this, and I'm just putting them right next to each other. French knots were so difficult for me to learn. It took me 5 years, and I finally learned them after lots of trial and error, and now I just love using them all the time, and I think they are adorable on these little hats. So I'm just putting them wherever I like. Sometimes I make them into a pyramid shape, sometimes I make them into like a oval cluster or a circular cluster. I just do them over and over again until it kind of fills in a bunch of little petals or buds into this this floral here. And I will eventually put a total of 4 of these onto the hat, 2 on the left side of the rose and 2 on the right side of the rose. But I'll go ahead and do the stems in this video so that you can see how I incorporate a variety of stems to each hat. And I think that is what makes them one of a kind and unique. You'll notice I'm not using a hoop. Hats are difficult to stitch on. They're probably the hardest thing that I make, but they're my best seller. So it's worth it. Just go slow. It may take you a couple hours to complete one hat. They're very time consuming, but if you go slow, you won't get poked as often. But be prepared, because you can't see inside the hat as easy as you can the back of a hoop, perhaps. But you'll notice I don't turn the hat over very often. And on these hats, I like to do daisy flowers, so I fill in with those lastly, and these are just the daisy stitch, and I have 5 petals per flower. Here you see me, I have a knot. My thread was way too long for this flower. I like to use long thread, and sometimes it gets me in trouble, so I just had to take out that little knot and reposition my petal here a little bit, but that's all part of the process. The shorter your thread, the easier it is to manipulate, but you do have to keep rethreading if you use short threads. So this little daisy is going to have 5 petals, like I said, and I'll come back at the very end after I put the stems in to do another French knot in the center, just to give that flower a little bit more dimension and add a little bit more color to it. I do like to balance my designs on my hats, so on this left side here, I'm planning on putting, I think, 3 little daisies. They're blue, they're not your typical daisy, I suppose, and then 2 on the right side, and that just varies. It's really just thinking and planning where you think things might look nice and trying it out, and sometimes taking them out if you don't like them, and sometimes letting it set because you come back to it and you're like, oh, I do like that after all, and that's perfectly fine. The key to creativity is just to enjoy what you're doing and to find it therapeutic and relaxing, and just keep trying things to see what you like. For these stems, I do another daisy stitch on the stem for the leaves. The French knots from the previous little taupe flower, those are just straight stitches, and I just use these to kind of fill in those white patches just to make it look like a full wildflower field, and that just helps it to look more realistic and fills in the shape nicely. I wasn't sure how difficult West Virginia would be to fill in since I've only done Ohio, but West Virginia was a joy to stitch, and I actually love the little shape of this state. It's very unexpected, and it's a sweet, very distinguishable state. So it was very fun to stitch this. So I'll stitch the stems on the left side, and then I'll go back in and stitch the stems on the right side, adding these little daisy stitch leaves on some of the stems. In some places I didn't have room to stitch them, and that's okay, because in the wild, flowers all look different. And so the last step is probably the most satisfying. After I put these little French knots in the center, I'm going to spray this hat to get the blue marker to disappear. I might have to do this once or twice just to ensure that it does go away. And I just use water from my tap, and this is the most satisfying part. And so I hope you enjoy.